In the quiet town of Brookfield, life moved slowly, almost gently. It was the kind of place where people waved at each other from their porches, where children rode bicycles until sunset, and where nothing truly bad was ever supposed to happen. Brookfield was proud of its safety. Crime was something people watched on television, not something they expected to live through. At the center of this peaceful town lived Daniel Harper. Daniel was known by almost everyone. He lived on Maple Street in a two-story white house with blue shutters and a small wooden fence. Every morning at exactly 7:30, he stepped outside wearing a neatly pressed shirt, kissed his wife goodbye, and waved to anyone who happened to be passing by. His smile was warm, confident, and familiar. To many, it felt comforting just to see him. Daniel worked as an insurance advisor, a job that required him to talk to people, listen to their problems, and offer solutions. He was good at it. His clients trusted him easily. He spoke calmly, never raised his voice, and always seemed patient. People often said he had one of those faces that made you feel safe. At home, Daniel was a devoted husband and father. His wife Emily described him as steady and reliable. He never forgot anniversaries or birthdays. He attended parent-teacher meetings, fixed broken shelves, and helped his children with homework every evening. On weekends, he coached his son's youth football team and cheered louder than anyone else from the sidelines. Neighbors admired him. Other fathers wanted to be like him. Mothers trusted him around their kids. Elderly residents often asked Daniel for help with small tasks, and he never said no. He shoveled snow from driveways in winter and brought homemade food to families when someone fell sick. Nothing about Daniel Harper raised suspicion, but perfection, when examined closely, often hides cracks. Late at night, when the town was asleep and the streetlights cast long shadows across Maple Street, Daniel changed. While Emily slept upstairs, believing her husband was beside her, Daniel often lay awake staring at the ceiling. His thoughts drifted to places he never spoke about. His mind replayed moments that brought him a strange sense of calm and excitement, emotions he couldn't explain to anyone. Sometimes, he would quietly get out of bed and walk down to the basement. The basement was Daniel's private space. He told Emily it was where he organized old files and stored unused furniture. The door was always locked. Emily never questioned it. Everyone deserves personal space, she thought, especially someone who worked so hard for his family. Down there, away from the world, Daniel allowed himself to be honest. The basement smelled faintly of metal and cleaning chemicals. The walls were bare, the lights dim. Against the far wall stood a tall cabinet, secured with a heavy lock. Inside were objects carefully arranged, wrapped, and labeled. Each item carried a memory. Each memory carried a story no one else would ever hear. Daniel didn't see himself as evil. In his mind, he was in control. He told himself he was different from the criminals on the news. He didn't act out of anger or desperation. He planned. He waited. He chose carefully. That belief made him dangerous. During the day, Daniel blended in perfectly. He attended church on Sundays, sat in the front row with his family, and bowed his head during prayers. He volunteered at charity events and once organized a fundraiser for a local hospital. The police chief shook his hand and thanked him personally. The irony was cruel. The people sworn to protect the town trusted him completely. Daniel understood people very well. He knew how to listen. He knew when to nod, when to speak, and when to stay silent. He noticed details others ignored. Who felt lonely? Who felt stressed? Who needed help? These observations were part of his daily routine, hidden behind casual conversations and friendly smiles. Brookfield had no idea it was being studied. Emily, like everyone else, believed she knew her husband. She often told friends that Daniel was the calm in her life. When things went wrong, he never panicked. He always found solutions. But there were moments, small and quiet, that made her uneasy. Sometimes Daniel returned home later than expected, saying work had run long. His explanations were always reasonable. Still, his eyes seemed distant, as if his thoughts were somewhere else. On rare occasions, Emily noticed faint scratches on his hands. He laughed them off, blaming home repairs or office work. She accepted his answers because she trusted him. Trust is powerful. It silences doubt. Daniel loved routines. Routines gave him comfort. Every detail of his life was organized, from his morning schedule to the route he took to work. He believed that order kept chaos away. That belief extended to everything he did, including the darkest parts of his life. He followed rules. His own rules. Never act impulsively. Never draw attention. Never repeat patterns. Those rules helped him remain invisible. While Brookfield slept peacefully, unaware of the secrets hidden within its quiet streets, a storm was slowly building. A storm that would shatter the town's sense of safety forever. Daniel Harper was not a man who lost control. He was a man who chose when to use it, and no one saw it coming. The first disappearance happened on a rainy October evening. Brookfield had been blanketed in a steady drizzle, the streets glistening under the pale glow of streetlights. People were tucked safely inside their homes, unaware of the danger lurking in plain sight. Rachel Mills, a young woman who worked late at a diner on the edge of town, finished her shift and stepped out into the damp night. She was tired but cheerful, humming softly to herself as she unlocked her car. Her car, a small silver sedan, had been parked at the edge of the lot. Rain slicked the asphalt, making everything shimmer. She didn't notice the man leaning casually against the lamppost, his hood pulled low, watching her movements. That man, of course, was Daniel Harper. He had been following Rachel for weeks, learning her routine. Every movement she made had been logged in his mind. He knew she would leave the diner at precisely 11:15 p.m., that she always stopped at the gas station across the street to grab a bottle of water, and that she never locked her car door properly. Daniel blended seamlessly into the shadows. He looked like any other passerby, someone unnoticed in the background of life. But when Rachel got into her car, he quietly followed, maintaining a careful distance. He was patient, calculated, and invisible. Rachel never reached her apartment. Her car was found parked neatly near the gas station where she had stopped, the engine still running, the radio softly playing an old song. There were no signs of struggle, no footprints in the wet parking lot, nothing that suggested she had been forced into a vehicle. The police investigated, but there were no leads. Rachel seemed to have vanished into thin air. Friends and family were desperate, placing flyers and offering rewards, but weeks turned into months without a single clue. Slowly, hope began to fade. The case went cold, another unsolved mystery for the local police to shelve. Then, a year later, another person disappeared. This time, it was a traveling salesman named Thomas Grady. He had been driving along the highway that connected Brookfield to neighboring towns. He was known to stop frequently, take breaks at small diners, and always check into motels along his route. He was careful but predictable. The last time anyone saw him, he had just exited a small rest stop and waved at a passing car. That wave was the last human interaction he would ever have. His vehicle was later discovered parked along a quiet country road, engine off, doors locked. Again, no one saw a struggle. Again, no one could explain why he disappeared. Then came the college student, Megan Ross, who vanished one Thursday evening on her way home from a late lecture. She had stayed late to meet with her study group and had taken a shortcut through a less traveled path. Witnesses reported seeing a man walking behind her at a distance, but he disappeared when approached. Megan never reached her apartment. A frantic search revealed no evidence of her whereabouts. It seemed as though she had vanished into the night, swallowed by the darkness. After Megan, the next victim was a single father named Richard Banks. He had been walking home from the grocery store when he simply disappeared. There were no signs of struggle, no witnesses, no explanation. Families across Brookfield grew uneasy. 5 people had vanished over 6 years, each under different circumstances, each seeming unrelated. The police began to wonder if the town was simply unlucky, that random accidents or voluntary disappearances explained the events. But there was a pattern, subtle but unmistakable. All 5 victims had been alone at the time of their disappearance. All 5 had been traveling through areas Daniel Harper could access without raising suspicion. And all 5 had crossed paths, unknowingly, with a man they believed to be harmless. The frightening reality was that Daniel Harper's life allowed him access without question. His job required him to travel across multiple towns, meeting clients, conducting home visits, and attending seminars. Every disappearance coincided with Daniel being in the vicinity, though only briefly. He knew how to appear casual, how to never stay long enough to be noticed, how to slip into the background. Daniel had perfected the art of invisibility in plain sight. He studied people carefully, learning their habits, fears, and weaknesses. He observed them from a distance, blending into crowds, appearing harmless, even friendly. If a potential victim looked suspicious or unapproachable, he moved on, waiting for the next opportunity. When the timing was right, he acted swiftly and without hesitation. There was a cruel efficiency in his method, a precision that made detection nearly impossible. At home, Daniel continued his life as the perfect husband and father. He attended school plays, coached football, helped with homework, and never missed a family dinner. Emily, his wife, noticed small oddities but dismissed them as stress or fatigue. She sometimes saw him wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, restless, or holding his phone too tightly. He would offer vague explanations about work trips or deadlines, answers that seemed rehearsed but convincing enough to silence doubts. Neighbors described him as polite, friendly, and reliable. He was often the first to help with errands, community projects, or small acts of kindness. Some even confided in him personal problems, seeking advice, never imagining that behind the calm, trustworthy exterior lay a darkness no one could imagine. Daniel's understanding of human behavior made him especially dangerous. He knew exactly how to manipulate trust, charm, and fear to his advantage. He could appear caring and attentive while planning the most sinister acts. He studied the routines of his victims, memorized their schedules, and waited for opportunities when no one else would notice. No one suspected Daniel Harper, and that was precisely the point. Every disappearance was cloaked in normalcy, every movement carefully orchestrated. The rain-slicked streets, the dimly lit highways, the quiet suburban paths, all provided him with the perfect backdrop. People believed in the safety of their town and the goodness of their neighbors. That belief became a tool Daniel wielded with terrifying skill. When the police began reviewing each disappearance, they saw chaos. Unrelated victims, no clear motives, no connections. Each case seemed isolated. But beneath the surface, there was a pattern only a patient observer could detect. The victims were not random. They were chosen. Every encounter was calculated. Every step was planned. And Daniel Harper, the man everyone trusted, was the common factor, moving unnoticed across years and towns, leaving nothing but fear and unanswered questions in his wake. Brookfield remained unaware that a shadow walked among them. People continued their routines, waved at neighbors, and trusted the familiar faces around them. Meanwhile, Daniel Harper's secret continued to grow, carefully hidden beneath the appearance of normalcy. His patience and attention to detail ensured that he remained invisible, and he knew it. The town's safety was an illusion, a fragile comfort that he could destroy in an instant. He had already begun thinking about his next target. He watched from the sidelines, learning habits, assessing vulnerability, and planning with meticulous precision. The town's sense of security gave him confidence. No one suspected a thing. They had no reason to. Daniel Harper was the perfect neighbor, the devoted husband, the caring father. And while Brookfield slept, Daniel prepared, silently, methodically, for the next disappearance. By the time Mark Lewis, a local mechanic, disappeared, Brookfield was beginning to feel the weight of unease. It wasn't something people openly discussed. Outwardly, life seemed normal, but whispers started circulating in quiet corners. at the grocery store, in school hallways, and at the local diner where residents gathered for coffee. Something wasn't right, and though no one could put their finger on it, a sense of vulnerability had begun to settle over the town. Mark was known by almost everyone. He ran a small garage on the edge of Brookfield, the kind of place where word of mouth mattered more than advertisements. He was a dependable man, friendly but practical, with a reputation for honesty. People trusted him with their cars, their questions, and sometimes their lives. Mark's disappearance shook the community to its core. He didn't vanish during a long commute or on a distant business trip. He disappeared while performing a routine errand, someone thought to be in the safety of their familiar neighborhood. That made it worse. On the day he vanished, Mark had been meeting a client at the garage. A family sedan pulled into the lot, and Mark went to greet the driver. The meeting was brief, and afterward, Mark was seen heading toward the back of the lot to check a vehicle. That was the last confirmed sighting. By the time his co-workers realized he hadn't returned to the office, panic had already begun to rise. Calls to the client went unanswered, his tools remained where they had been left, and Mark's car was still parked outside the garage. There was no sign of a struggle, no fingerprints, no indication that anything violent had occurred. For the first time, the police began to notice a faint, troubling thread. They pulled records from the previous disappearances, reviewing reports of Rachel Mills, Thomas Grady, Megan Russ, and Richard Banks. Initially, it seemed coincidental. After all, each victim had disappeared under different circumstances, with no shared relationships or backgrounds. But there was one detail no one had considered: the locations. Every disappearance had occurred within areas that Daniel Harper had accessed through Wake. His routine, while outwardly mundane, had allowed him proximity without suspicion. Detectives began quietly reviewing his travel logs, insurance appointments, and work-related trips. Every time, Daniel's schedule seemed innocuous. He was in town for Wake, meeting clients, or attending professional seminars. He left no permanent trace, no suspicious behavior. His careful planning ensured that he could be present without drawing attention. The subtle patterns were nearly invisible to anyone not scrutinizing them carefully. Meanwhile, at home, Daniel continued the charade. Emily remained oblivious to the growing storm. She still saw her husband as calm, attentive, and dependable. Occasionally, she noted oddities: a sudden late night at work, a phone call he didn't take, a shadow crossing his eyes, but each was dismissed as stress or fatigue. Her trust in Daniel ran deep, and she clung to it fiercely. To Emily, their life was ordinary, predictable, and safe. Daniel's ability to maintain dual lives was remarkable. By day, he was a devoted husband, a supportive father, a trusted member of the community. By night, he became patient, calculating, and meticulous in his planning. He would study potential victims from afar, learning their routines, noting their weaknesses, and determining the perfect time to strike. He never acted impulsively. Each step was deliberate, each action calculated to avoid detection. The disappearance of Mark Lewis, however, began to expose cracks in Daniel's carefully constructed life. Detectives, frustrated by the lack of leads, turned to surveillance footage along the routes surrounding the last known locations of all 5 victims. That was when they noticed something odd: a silver sedan appearing near multiple disappearance sites. The plate was partially obscured, but the make and model matched the vehicle Daniel had owned. He had recently sold it, replacing it with a newer model, but the pattern was becoming harder to ignore. Under intense scrutiny, police began following Daniel discreetly. For the first time, they observed his routines in detail. Everything appeared normal, almost too normal. He attended meetings, drove to work, dropped off his children at school, and smiled politely at neighbors. There was no behavior that would raise concern. He went shopping, stopped for coffee, and engaged in casual conversations as though nothing had changed. Yet detectives knew that outward appearances could be deceiving, and in Daniel Harper's case, they were a masterful deception. Then one night, a break occurred. Daniel took an unplanned drive after dinner. He didn't inform Emily. His phone was off, leaving no trace. Detectives, who had been monitoring from a distance, followed cautiously. Daniel drove to the edge of town, to an old storage facility tucked between rows of industrial buildings. The area was seldom visited and quiet at night, making it perfect for someone wanting to remain unnoticed. He entered the facility, unlocked a storage unit using a key carefully concealed under his car, and disappeared inside. Officers watched from the shadows, their breaths shallow with tension. They waited, unsure of what they might find. What they did not anticipate was the chilling reality behind the locked doors. Inside the unit, they discovered a collection of items connected to the missing individuals: wallets, personal effects, clothing, and even small mementos, each tagged and meticulously stored. Some items were seemingly harmless, like a necklace or wristwatch, but each carried a story of abduction and betrayal. The evidence was undeniable, the culmination of years of careful planning. Daniel Harper, the man who smiled at neighbors, who coached children, and who supported his wife and family, had hidden a monstrous reality behind the perfect Vinay. The revelations sent shockwaves through the police department. Investigators were stunned at how someone could maintain such a duplicity for years without being caught. It wasn't only the acts themselves that were horrifying, but the control, patience, and calculation required to keep the community unaware. When Daniel was finally arrested, the town of Brookfield reeled in disbelief. News spread quickly. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues struggled to reconcile the image of the caring husband and devoted father with the amazing truth of a calculated serial killer. Emily, blindsided and heartbroken, could not fathom the extent of Daniel's secret life. Every shared memory, every family event, every late-night conversation, now carried the weight of deception. The man she thought she knew was a stranger, a shadow concealed in the most familiar of faces. Daniel's arrest began a series of confessions that shocked even the most seasoned detectives. He described in cold, detached detail how he chose his victims, how he observed them, and how he maintained control over each situation. He spoke of patience and timing, of understanding human behavior to an extraordinary degree, and of ensuring that his home life never hinted at the chaos he left behind. The duality of his existence became more disturbing the deeper the investigation went. As the police pieced together timelines, alibis, and travel records, they realized that Daniel had been operating without detection for years. Each disappearance, though seemingly random, had been meticulously planned. He had learned from his mistakes, adjusting his approach, refining his methods, and staying ahead of suspicion. The town's faith in the ordinary and in the safety of their community had been exploited, and Daniel Harper had done so with terrifying efficiency. For the families of the missing, the revelations were unbearable. Each confession, each recovered item, served as a reminder of what had been taken. The town mourned not only the victims but the betrayal of trust. Brookfield, once considered safe and predictable, had been infiltrated by darkness disguised as normalcy. Yet, even in the face of mounting evidence, Daniel remained calm. He did not panic. He did not plead. He spoke with a clarity that chilled the room, explaining his actions without remorse, only rationalization. His ability to separate his home life from his criminal acts, to maintain a facade of normalcy, and to execute his plans with precision, revealed a mind both intelligent and deeply disturbed. While Daniel awaited trial, the town struggled to recover. Fear lingered in quiet corners, conversations were hushed, and trust became a rare commodity. Parents watched their children more closely. Neighbors eyed each other with cautious suspicion, and even the simplest interactions carried the weight of doubt. Brookfield had been forever altered, a lesson in the dangers that can hide behind familiarity and charm. The disappearance of Mark Lewis was the turning point, the moment when cracks began to show in Daniel Harper's perfect life. Until then, he had remained untouchable, his crimes hidden beneath a veneer of normality. But once detectives began piecing together the pattern, the carefully constructed illusion began to crumble. The patient, meticulous predator who had walked among the town's unsuspecting residents for years was finally being confronted with the reality of exposure. Brookfield would never again see Daniel Harper as the man they thought he was. The perfect neighbor, the devoted father, the reliable husband, all became symbols of deception, a reminder that evil can hide behind a familiar smile, that danger can be silent, and that the people we trust the most may carry the darkest secrets. As investigations continued and evidence mounted, the chilling truth became unavoidable. Daniel Harper had not only manipulated the town's trust but had also mastered it. The careful observation of human behavior, the planning of opportunities, the patient waiting for the right moment, all had combined to create a predator who could operate undetected for years. It was a stark, terrifying reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that the line between ordinary life and horror can be thinner than anyone could imagine. And while Brookfield attempted to heal, Daniel Harper remained calm, composed, and uncannily in control, his life behind bars only beginning to reveal the depth of the darkness that had once walked openly among them. The morning of Daniel Harper's arrest began like any other in Brookfield. The sun rose over the quiet town, spilling golden light across Maple Street. Birds chirped in the trees, children bundled up for school, and neighbors went about their routines, unaware that their sense of normalcy was about to shatter. The street seemed peaceful, but attention lingered beneath the calm. Police cars quietly moved into position, their engines idling softly, blending with the sounds of a town waking up. Officers had spent months carefully planning this moment, ensuring they had enough evidence to make the arrest without endangering anyone. Emily Harper was the first to sense something was wrong. She stepped out onto the porch to fetch the morning paper and saw the flashing lights reflected in the windows of her neighbors' homes. A knot formed in her stomach as she noticed uniformed officers approaching her house. She called out for Daniel, her voice trembling slightly, but there was no response. For a moment, she felt disbelief. Perhaps it was a mistake. Perhaps someone was at the wrong address. She couldn't imagine what could be happening. When Daniel finally appeared at the door, dressed in his usual crisp shirt and slacks, he looked calm, almost serene. There was no panic, no attempt to flee. He did not resist when officers placed handcuffs on him. Instead, he followed them quietly, speaking only to ask that Emily and the children be taken care of. His composure unnerved the neighbors who had gathered to watch, whispering in disbelief. The man they had known for years, the friendly neighbor who helped with repairs, coached their children, and attended every community event, was now being led away by the police. The arrest was just the beginning. Inside the local police station, detectives began the painstaking process of questioning Daniel. They had gathered significant evidence, including the items found in the storage unit, personal belongings, mementos, and objects tied to the missing individuals. They also had witness accounts, traffic records, and surveillance footage linking Daniel to multiple disappearance sites. Yet, even with this mountain of evidence, Daniel did not confess immediately. He maintained his calm demeanor, denying everything at first. He claimed that the items found were planted, that someone was attempting to frame him. He denied involvement in the disappearances, offering explanations that seemed rehearsed, calculated, and designed to mislead. Detectives were frustrated. They had expected resistance, maybe even anger or panic, but the level of control Daniel displayed was extraordinary. He spoke with precision, carefully avoiding any statements that could be used against him. Each answer was measured, each pause deliberate. Yet beneath the surface of his composed exterior, investigators sensed an intelligence at work, a mind that was always 2 steps ahead. For days, Daniel remained silent, refusing to provide details. The police were forced to rely on circumstantial evidence and the testimonies of neighbors, friends, and family members who began recounting small oddities they had noticed over the years. Emily described the late-night drives he took without explanation, the obsessive attention to his phone, and the moments when he seemed distant, almost lost in thought. Friends recalled how he sometimes asked unusual questions about people's routines, probing in ways that now seemed unsettling. These anecdotes, combined with the physical evidence, created a picture that was increasingly difficult to ignore. Then, without warning, Daniel asked to speak. It was an unusual shift in behavior, and detectives approached with caution. When he began to talk, he did so calmly, methodically, and with a level of detail that chilled everyone in the room. He confessed to 5 murders, explaining with cold clarity how he selected his victims, how he observed their routines, and how he executed each abduction. He described the patience required, the meticulous planning, and the careful timing that allowed him to remain undetected for so long. Each confession revealed not only the acts themselves, but the calculated psychology behind them. Daniel admitted that he derived a sense of control from these acts, a feeling he could never achieve in his ordinary, structured life. What shocked investigators even more was the revelation that there were likely additional victims. Daniel admitted that some of the bodies might never be found, that he had chosen locations and circumstances designed to leave no trace. He spoke of the thrill of being able to walk among his neighbors, to attend family events, and to maintain a facade of normalcy while harboring a dark secret. The duality of his existence, the ease with which he switched between loving father and calculated killer, was almost impossible to comprehend. For Emily, the confessions were devastating. She had spent years believing in the stability and integrity of her family, in the safety of the life she had built with Daniel. Every memory was now tainted by doubt. The vacations they had taken, the dinners they had shared, the quiet moments in their living room, all became sinister reminders of the lies that had been hidden behind Daniel's calm exterior. The man she had married, the man who had held their children and comforted her during difficult times, was a stranger. The town of Brookfield struggled to process the truth. News of Daniel's confessions spread quickly, reaching every corner of the community. Friends and neighbors wrestled with disbelief, anger, and fear. How could someone so familiar, so trusted, be capable of such calculated cruelty? How could the man who coached football, helped with homework, and smiled so warmly at the grocery store be a predator hiding in plain sight? Psychologists and criminal profilers were brought in to analyze Daniel's behavior. They explained that his ability to maintain dual lives, to function as a devoted family man while committing heinous crimes, was indicative of extreme compartmentalization. He separated his desires, his impulses, and his actions into distinct categories, allowing him to navigate normal life without arousing suspicion. The very qualities that had made him a trusted member of the community, patience, attention to detail, intelligence, had also enabled him to commit crimes with chilling efficiency. During the trial, the evidence against Daniel was overwhelming. The items recovered from a storage unit, witness testimonies, and his own confessions painted a vivid picture of a man who had manipulated every aspect of his life to conceal his dark impulses. Yet Daniel remained composed throughout, never showing emotion, never pleading for leniency. His presence in the courtroom was unsettling. There was a quiet confidence in his demeanor, a sense that he remained fully in control, even as the world around him began to unravel. Emily testified during the trial, recounting her experiences with Daniel. She spoke of the small signs she had ignored, the questions she had never asked, and the life she had believed was ordinary. Her testimony was heartfelt and haunting, a window into the impact of Daniel's deception on those closest to him. The jury listened in stunned silence, grappling with the reality that the man in front of them, the father and husband they might have once seen as benign, was responsible for a series of calculated murders that had terrorized multiple families. Outside the courtroom, Brookfield remained tense. Neighbors spoke in hushed tones, questioning how well they really knew those around them. Parents held their children closer, and the once trusted streets now felt uncertain. Community events, once filled with laughter and warmth, were now overshadowed by suspicion. Daniel Harper had not only committed unthinkable crimes, but had also shattered the town's sense of safety, leaving a lingering fear that would take years to overcome. As the trial progressed, Daniel's own words continued to horrify. He detailed how he meticulously observed potential victims, tracking their movements, studying their routines, and identifying vulnerabilities. He explained how he maintained control, ensuring that no one suspected him. He spoke of the thrill of manipulating perceptions, of the satisfaction derived from being able to live openly while harboring such dark secrets. Each revelation painted a portrait of a man who was both highly intelligent and deeply disturbed, someone capable of extraordinary patience and extraordinary cruelty. Emily, meanwhile, struggled to rebuild her life. She changed her name and moved with her children, seeking distance from the shadow of Daniel's actions. The house where they had lived, once filled with memories of family life, became a symbol of betrayal and fear. Daniel's manipulation extended beyond the victims themselves, affecting everyone who had trusted him, leaving scars that would take years to heal. When the final verdict was delivered, Daniel Harper was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent as the judge pronounced the sentence, a reminder of the gravity of his crimes and the impact on the community. Daniel remained calm, showing no visible emotion, accepting the sentence as if it was simply another step in the carefully structured life he had always maintained. Even after being incarcerated, Daniel's presence lingered in Brookfield. Psychologists noted that he continued to exert influence, albeit indirectly, through the fear and trauma he had created. Letters from curious strangers, questions from journalists, and inquiries from students studying criminal behavior all reached him in prison. He never responded, maintaining the silence that had characterized his interactions with the outside world. The arrest and trial revealed not only the depth of Daniel Harper's crimes, but also the sophistication of his deception. He had carefully managed every aspect of his life, ensuring that no one could see the darkness that lay beneath. The duality of his existence, the family man and the serial killer, was a chilling reminder that evil can be hidden behind the most ordinary faces, and that the most trusted individuals may harbor secrets that are impossible to detect without careful scrutiny. Brookfield, scarred but resilient, began the slow process of healing. Community members worked to restore trust, support the families of victims, and ensure that such a betrayal would never happen again. But the shadow of Daniel Harper's actions remained, a haunting reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that the people we think we know best may be capable of unimaginable darkness. And Daniel, confined behind prison walls, remained calm, methodical, and unrepentant, the perfect predator who had finally been caught, but whose story would continue to haunt the town for generations to come. After Daniel Harper was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, Brookfield was a town forever changed. The streets that had once felt safe now carried a lingering tension. Residents began locking doors they had previously left open, watching strangers with cautious eyes, and questioning the motives of even the most familiar faces. Trust, once freely given, had been shattered. The community realized that a predator had lived among them undetected, hiding in plain sight behind the image of a loving husband, devoted father, and friendly neighbor. The ripple effects of Daniel's crimes extended far beyond the immediate pain of his victims' families. They infiltrated the collective psyche of the town, leaving a sense of unease that refused to dissipate. Emily Harper, still reeling from the shock of her husband's confession, made the difficult decision to leave Brookfield. She changed her name and relocated with her children to another state, hoping to escape the shadow of Daniel's crimes. Despite the distance, the memories lingered. Every time she saw a man who resembled Daniel in stature or mannerisms, a wave of fear would wash over her. Every knock at the door, every stranger at the grocery store, reminded her that appearances could be deceiving. She carried the burden of knowing that the man she had loved and trusted had been capable of unimaginable horror. Even after the trial, questions continued to haunt Brookfield. Families of the missing struggled to cope with the reality that some of their loved ones might never be found. Investigators reviewed old cases, searching for connections, hoping to locate remains or trace evidence that could provide closure. Some families received personal effects or items Daniel had kept, small tangible reminders of their loved ones that offered neither solace nor answers. Others were left with nothing but uncertainty, forced to accept that Daniel's meticulous planning had erased any trace of their existence. For the community, the fear was not just about what had happened but about the possibility of what could have been. Daniel Harper had been careful, calculated, and patient. His methods were sophisticated enough that he had eluded detection for years, exploiting the very trust that people had in one another. The revelation that he had manipulated appearances so flawlessly forced residents to reconsider how well they truly knew their neighbors. People began scrutinizing their surroundings, questioning interactions they had previously taken for granted, and reconsidering the meaning of ordinary gestures of kindness or friendliness. Psychologists and criminal profilers studied Daniel Harper's case extensively, fascinated by the duality of his personality. They analyzed how he could compartmentalize his life so completely, separating his role as a family man from his secret life as a serial killer. His calm, methodical demeanor, his patience, and his attention to detail all contributed to his ability to remain undetected. Experts noted that Daniel's intelligence and manipulative skills were crucial to his success. He understood human behavior, social dynamics, and the ways people trust patterns and routines. He had weaponized the ordinary, turning everyday predictability into a tool for concealment. The chilling aspect of Daniel's case was not just the acts he committed but the audacity of his deception. He lived openly, attended public events, and interacted with neighbors and colleagues without raising suspicion. He celebrated birthdays, coached children's sports, and comforted friends in times of need, all while harboring a darkness that no one could see. His ability to maintain this facade forced the community to confront the uncomfortable truth that evil could exist behind the most ordinary faces, that danger could be present in places thought to be safe, and that appearances could never be wholly trusted. As years passed, the story of Daniel Harper became a cautionary tale, both within Brookfield and beyond. Media outlets covered the case extensively, delving into the psychology of a man who could compartmentalize his life to such an extreme degree. Documentaries, books, and news features recounted the details of his crimes, the investigative breakthroughs, and the chilling confessions he had made. While the attention brought some measure of awareness, it also revived painful memories for the families of victims, forcing them to relive trauma they had hoped to bury. Inside prison, Daniel Harper remained enigmatic. He did not speak publicly about his motives beyond what he had already confessed, maintaining the silence and control that had defined him for years. Letters from curious strangers, criminal justice students, and journalists occasionally reached him, but he rarely responded. When he did, it was in short, calculated replies, maintaining the aura of calm detachment that had characterized his interactions throughout his life. Prison became another stage for his control, a space where he remained inflappable, observing the world beyond the bars with the same calculated patience he had always possessed. For Brookfield, the legacy of Daniel Harper extended beyond the immediate trauma of his crimes. Community members implemented new safety measures, increasing neighborhood watch programs and encouraging open communication about unusual behavior. Parents became hypervigilant, keeping children close and questioning routines previously taken for granted. Schools implemented programs to teach children about personal safety and awareness, lessons born from the horrifying reality that evil could hide behind familiar faces. The town's collective consciousness had shifted, reshaping the very way people perceived trust, safety, and familiarity. Despite these precautions, the psychological scars remained. Some residents moved away entirely, unwilling to remain in a town forever shadowed by Daniel Harper's presence. Others stayed, driven by the need to reclaim their sense of security, but the memory of the crimes lingered like an unshakable shadow. Public spaces, once casual and welcoming, carried an undercurrent of caution. Conversations were hushed when discussing the case. Smiles were tempered with suspicion. The town had learned, in the most painful way, that the ordinary could hide the extraordinary evil. For Emily and her children, life after Brookfield was a delicate balancing act. They attempted to rebuild, to create a sense of normalcy in their new surroundings, but the knowledge of Daniel's crimes was a constant companion. Even ordinary moments, such as meeting a new neighbor or walking down a quiet street, were colored by the awareness of what had happened and the fear of what could have been. Therapy and counseling helped, but the trauma was enduring. The realization that her husband had been capable of such darkness left Emily permanently changed, cautious, and ever vigilant. The haunting truth of Daniel Harper's life was encapsulated in a single, chilling idea. The people we believe we know best may be the very ones capable of unimaginable acts. His story became a warning, a grim reminder that appearances can be deceptive, that trust can be exploited, and that evil often hides behind ordinary faces. The man who coached children, attended family events, and smiled warmly at neighbors had led a double life, one that allowed him to commit atrocities while maintaining the illusion of normalcy. In the years following his arrest, occasional revelations emerged about his methods. Investigators discovered hidden compartments, secret storage areas, and meticulously organized records that detailed his planning. Every step of his crimes had been calculated with precision. He had studied law enforcement procedures, avoided patterns that could be traced, and used the trust of those around him to his advantage. The more details surfaced, the more disturbing it became to the community. Daniel Harper had not acted recklessly. He had not been impulsive. He had been deliberate, patient, and terrifyingly methodical. Yet even as the horrors of his crimes were revealed, there was a strange fascination with the mechanics of his deception. Criminal profilers analyzed his behavior to understand how he could maintain a dual life for so long. Academics studied his methods, attempting to apply insights to prevent similar cases in the future. Psychologists examined the compartmentalization of his personality, noting that his ability to separate his actions from his family life was rare and indicative of a calculated mind. Daniel Harper became, in a sense, a case study, a dark example of the complexity of human behavior and the depths of deception possible in seemingly ordinary individuals. Brookfield eventually began to heal, but the scars left by Daniel Harper's crimes were permanent. Community events resumed, children played in the streets once more, and families attempted to reclaim a sense of safety. However, the knowledge of what had transpired remained a quiet presence. Residents remained vigilant, wary of the familiar, cautious of the ordinary. The story of the family man who was a secret serial killer served as a perpetual reminder that evil can exist behind the most trustworthy facades. As for Daniel Harper, prison became his world, a place where his influence was limited but his control remained. He spent his days reading, observing, and occasionally interacting with those who sought insight into his mind. He maintained the same calm, meticulous demeanor that had defined him for decades, the very traits that had allowed him to operate undetected for so long. Though he could no longer roam the streets of Brookfield, his presence continued to haunt the town, both as a memory and as a symbol of the dangers of blind trust. In the end, Daniel Harper's legacy was twofold. He left behind a trail of devastation and trauma, altering the lives of victims' families and the community forever. At the same time, his story served as a stark lesson in the importance of vigilance, awareness, and skepticism in the face of appearances. He had shown that evil could be hidden behind a smile, a friendly gesture, or a reputation for kindness. And he had demonstrated that the most terrifying predators are often those who seem the least suspicious. The final, haunting note came from a letter Daniel wrote shortly before his death in prison. In it, he reflected on his life and offered a single, unnaving statement: "You never truly know the people you love." The letter, brief and simple, became a chilling reminder of the case, a summation of the terror that had gripped Brookfield, and a testament to the frightening reality of a predator hiding in plain sight. Brookfield survived. Families rebuilt their lives, and the town slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. But the story of Daniel Harper, the family man who was secretly a serial killer, continued to echo through the streets, through conversations, and through the collective memory of a community forever changed. The man who once smiled at neighbors, hugged his children, and comforted his wife had revealed the darkness that could exist behind ordinary faces. And while justice had been served, the chilling reminder remained: evil can hide where you least expect it, and appearances can be deadly deceptive.